The Exquisite Pearl by Ar-Rahman As-Sa'adi, First Edition, published 2002, April, Safar, 1423 Hijrah, by the Jawziyah Press, London, England, United Kingdom. Translated by Abu Aaliyah Surkheel Sharif. Read by Luqman Abu Yusuf, 2024. Preface by the translator, Abu Aaliyah Surkheel Sharif. All praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. May Allah extol and shower abundant blessings and peace upon the best of His creation, the Prophet Muhammad, and upon his family, his companions, and all those who follow them until the day of resurrection. To proceed. The material landscape. Allah, exalted is He, said in the majestic Qur'an, "Whoever aspires to the harvest of the afterlife, we grant him increase in his harvest, and whoever aspires to the harvest of this world, we grant him of it here, but in the afterlife he shall have no portion." Surah Ashura, Ayah number 20. In today's maelstrom of materialism and spread of licentious Western liberalism, most people's aspirations tend not to extend beyond those of gratifying their desires and appeasing the urges of their appetites. That inner yearning within the human condition to know our origins and our Creator, to understand the purpose of our existence, to bring into our lives a richer and deeper sense of meaning has, for all intents and purposes, been stifled or turned into a social taboo. In short, those fundamental questions and inner yearnings that ultimately define our humanity have, in most cases, been either suppressed and ignored by the individuals or methodically purged from them. The result? Greed, selfishness, nihilism, and spiritual bankruptcy have become dominant hallmarks of many of today's individuals, whereas hedonism, mass consumerism, environmental vandalism, and rape of the earth's natural resources so as to ensure today's material comforts, perks, and profits have become emblematic of humanity at a more global level. It would seem that though the ideology of materialism has aided people in their actual quality of living, it nevertheless continues to play havoc with their actual quality of life. Caught up in this milieu is the Muslim world. Betaken with Western culture, the sole preoccupation for many Muslims has now become the standard of living and their own material advancement. As such, the Muslim world has fallen prey to a similar dysfunctionality and dissonance that inevitably occurs when faith, spirituality, and conformity to the divine will are neglected and materialism is embraced. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam forewarned, "By Allah, it is not poverty that I fear for you, but I fear the world will be open to you as it was open to those before you, and that you would compete with one another over it as they competed, and that it would destroy you as it destroyed them." The sound aspiration. Disengaging from this malady of materialism requires engaging the higher purpose for which we were created, the prelude to which is sound aspiration. What is meant by sound aspiration is the desire to draw closer to Allah through inner struggle, or mujahada. In other words, it is the heart's quest for its spiritual sustenance. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy on him, explained, "The signs of sound aspiration is that the aspirant's main concern lies in pleasing his Lord, preparing to meet Him, being grieved at the times he spent in other than his Lord's pleasure, and regretting the missed opportunities to be close and intimate with Him. The summary of this is that day in and day out, he has no concern other than this." One of the fruits of aspiration, this labor of love, is that of being granted inner peace. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whoever makes the afterlife his concern, Allah will gather together his affairs, place contentment in his heart, and the world will come to him despite his reluctance. Whoever makes the world his concern, Allah will split up his affairs, put poverty before him, and nothing of the world will come to him except what Allah has written for him. The Prophet ﷺ also said, Allah said, O son of Adam, free yourself for my worship, and I will fill your chest with sufficiency and remove your poverty. But if you do not, I will fill your hands with distraction and will not remove your poverty. Perhaps the profoundest fruit that arises as a result of this aspiration is being indemnified in Allah's divine love. As the Prophet ﷺ said, whenever Allah loves a person, He shelters him from worldliness. Here the question is often asked, how should material possessions and wealth be dealt with? Should they be totally abandoned? The answer to this apparent dilemma was aptly given by Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, who said, wealth should be viewed just like the toilet, in that you have need for it and resort to it when necessary, but it has no place in your heart. Our spiritual tradition. Islam's sacred law, or Sharia, not only provides guidance for man's external well-being, but it embodies a narrative for his inner growth as well. It is the inner narrative, or spiritual tradition, which guides him to subduing his bestial nature and elevating the angelic nature within his soul, as well as purifying the heart from the spiritual diseases that veil it from knowing Allah and being truly devoted to Him. Indeed, it is only when the soul transcends its bestiality and the heart is purified from the veils that render blind its spiritual perception can one be infused with the illuminations of Ihsan, the very essence of faith and spirituality, which the Prophet ﷺ explained as being that you worship Allah as if you see Him, for if you do not see Him, He sees you. Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, may Allah have mercy on him, said as part of his commentary to the above prophetic words, it indicates that the servant should worship Allah in this manner, namely evoking the feeling of His nearness and of His being with him as though he sees him. This in turn necessitates reverence, fear, awe, and glorification of Allah, as occurs in the narration of Abu Hurairah, that you revere Allah as if you see Him. It also necessitates sincerity in worship, as well as exerting all one's efforts in improving, completing, and perfecting it. Ibn Rajab further said, it has been said that it is the cause for the first part. This is because when the servant is ordered to have vigilance of Allah while worshipping Him, and to feel His closeness to the point that it is as if He sees Him, then this may be difficult. So he seeks aid to attain this through his faith that Allah sees him, is fully aware of his secret and public acts, his inner and outer states, and that nothing of his affairs is ever hidden from him. When he actualizes this station, it becomes easier for him to move to the second station, which is where there is a continual realization upon spiritual perception, basira, of Allah's closeness to His servant and of His being with him, to the extent that it is as if he actually sees him. It has further been said, rather it refers to the fact that whoever finds it difficult to worship Allah as if seeing Him, then he should worship Allah upon the realization that Allah sees him and is fully aware of what he is doing. So let him feel shy of Allah due to the divine gaze over him. As one of the Gnostics said, fear Allah, lest He becomes the most despised of those watching you. Another said, fear Allah in proportion to His power over you, and feel shy of Allah in proportion to His closeness to you. A female Gnostic from the Salaf said, whoever acts for Allah due to witnessing Allah is a Gnostic. Whoever acts for Allah due to knowing that Allah sees him is sincere. So this indicates the two stations that were previously mentioned. The first, the station of ikhlas, sincerity, which is where the servant acts while bringing to mind that Allah observes him, that Allah is fully conversant with whatever he is doing, and that Allah is close to him. So when the servant brings this to mind in his actions, this being the root of his actions, then he is sincere to Allah. This is because evoking this feeling during his actions prevents him from turning to other than Allah, or from desiring other than him in his actions. The second, the station of Mushahada. This is where the servant acts while witnessing Allah with his heart, which is when the heart is so illuminated by faith, and the spiritual perception is so heightened, it is as if the unseen is beheld with one's eyes. The required wayfaring. So, when love of Allah stirs in the heart and the winds of yearning for the afterlife diffuse throughout the soul, then striving against whatever hinders wayfaring to Allah becomes essential, in order to nurture this awakening. Allah Azza wa Jal says, "As for those who strive in us, we shall guide them to our paths." Surat Al-Ankabut, ayah number 69. Commenting upon this verse, Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy on him, said, Allah, transcendent is He, made guidance dependent upon jihad. The most perfect of people with regards guidance are those that perform jihad the most. The most obligatory jihad is the jihad against the nafs, your ego, capriciousness, or hawa, shaitan, and the dunya. Whoever wages jihad for Allah's sake against these four, Allah will guide to the paths of His good pleasure, which in turn leads to paradise. Whoever leaves jihad forfeits guidance in proportion to what he leaves of it. So a vital aspect of a servant's suluk is engaging in an inner struggle in order to attain a deep conviction in the Shariah's truths, remove sluggishness, make compliance with its rules easy and spontaneous, and to eradicate the ego's opposition. Put simply, it is to carry out the Shariah's commands, preserve it, and to do sincerely and with presence of heart. Furthermore, suluk is, as Ibn Taymiyyah explained, of two types. First, the suluk of the righteous, the Abrar, the companions of the right hand, which is fulfilling what is obligatory and forsaking what is forbidden, both inwardly and outwardly. Secondly, the suluk of the ones brought near, muqarrabun, the forerunners, which involves fulfilling the obligatory and the recommended as best as possible and leaving the forbidden and the disliked. The Prophet ﷺ said, Allah exalted is He said, "Whoever shows enmity to a friend of mine, I shall be at war with him. My servant does not draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the religious duties I have obligated upon him. And my servant continues to draw closer to me with voluntary deeds, so that I love him. When I love him, I am his hearing with which he hears, his seeing with which he sees, his hand with which he strikes, and his foot with which he walks." Once again, we are returned to the station of ihsan, as Ibn Rajab, may Allah have mercy on him, explained. Whenever a person strives in drawing closer to Allah, exalted is He, by performing the obligatory deeds, then the optional ones, Allah draws him closer to Himself and raises him from the degree of faith to that of ihsan. Here he begins to worship Allah, witnessing His presence and having vigilance, as if he sees Him. His heart fills with gnosis of Allah, and with love, reverence, fear, grandeur, awe, intimacy, and yearning of Him, to the extent that the heart is so filled with gnosis of Him that it sees Him with the eye of spiritual perception. Finally, as the servant embodies and internalizes obedience to Allah, and as his spirit is elevated and his ego debased, he is filled with a deep concern for people's welfare and for being in their service, aiding, guiding, counseling, and supplicating for them. It is here, in the absence of the ego, that the effusions of true altruism pour forth from the servant, exemplifying the prophetic concern and conduct. The blissful life. The Prophet ﷺ said, "He has relished the taste of faith who is pleased with Allah as Lord, with Islam as religion, and with Muhammad as his messenger." He ﷺ also said, "There are three things which, if they are present in anyone, will cause him to taste the sweetness of faith, that Allah and His Messenger are more beloved to him than all else, that he loves others only for the sake of Allah, and that he should hate to revert to disbelief after Allah has saved him from it, just as he would hate to be cast into a blazing fire. Recorded by Bukhari and Muslim. The heart, when it is truly sincere in its servitude to Allah, is given to taste such sweetness and experience such delight that nothing besides this servitude is held more beloved to it. For the spiritually sound heart finds nothing sweeter, more blissful or gratifying to it than the sweetness of Iman, which is born out of the labors of its gnosis, love, and servitude to Allah. Blessed and exalted is He. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah have mercy on him, said, "If you do not find the deed producing a sweetness or expansion in your heart, then blame it, for the Lord, exalted is He, is indeed appreciative." Meaning that He will reward the doer of the deed in this world with experiencing sweetness, expansion, and delight in his heart. Whenever one does not find this occurring, then the deed is defective. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy on him, elaborated upon this state of bliss and delight experienced by the sincere servant. He said, "There is no bliss, nor any delight, joy, or completeness for him, except in knowing Allah, loving Him, being tranquil in the remembrance of Him, feeling delighted in drawing closer to Him, and in yearning to meet Him, this being the paradise of the worldly life. Likewise, there is no delight or success for him in the afterlife, except with his being enveloped in the abode of bliss in the paradise of the next life. So there are for him two paradises. He will not enter the latter without first entering the former." I heard Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah sanctify his soul, saying, "Indeed, there is a paradise in this world. Whoever does not enter it will not enter the paradise of the afterlife." One of the Gnostics said, "There are times that pass over the heart about which I say, if the people of paradise are in the likes of this state, then what a wonderful life they are in." One of the lovers of Allah said, "The poor people of this world have left it without having tasted the sweetest thing in it." They asked, "What is the sweetest thing in it?" He replied, "Love of Allah, intimacy with Him, yearning to meet Him, drawing closer to Him, and turning away from everything other than Him," or words similar to it. Indeed, anyone with life in their heart affirms this and experiences its taste. The Beautific Vision. Allah, blessed and exalted is He, said, "For those who act with excellence is the greatest good, and even more," in Surah Yunus, ayah number 26. This greatest good is a reference to paradise, while the even more is a reference to gazing at the face of Allah. For the servant, having lived this life in the pursuit of Allah's good pleasure, and having striven to worship Him in this world, as though seeing Him, is then rewarded by Allah in the afterlife with paradise and its delights, the greatest of which is the beatific vision of Allah Himself. The Prophet of Mercy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, informed us, "When the people of paradise enter paradise, and those of hell enter hell, a herald shall call out, saying, 'O people of paradise, your Lord has undertaken a promise to you which He wishes to fulfill upon you.' They will inquire, 'What might that promise be? Has He not made heavy our scales, whitened our faces, brought us into paradise, and delivered us from hell?' Then the veil shall be lifted, and they shall gaze upon Him. By Allah, they will not have been given anything more beloved to them than looking at Him. O Lord, I seek your forgiveness for speaking about matters for which I am not from its people. O Allah, we seek refuge in your pleasure from your anger, in your forgiveness from your chastisement, and in you from you. O Allah, grace us with a fervent desire to meet you and with the delight of gazing upon your face." Recorded by Muslim, number 181. About the book. Here, 3 aspects of the book shall be discussed: its author, its theme, and its translation. The book's author. He is Ar-Rahman ibn Nasser ibn Abdullah ibn Hamad as-Sa'di from the tribe of Banu Tamim. He was born on the 12th of Muharram, 1307 after Hijrah, which corresponds to the year 1889 of the Common Era. He was born in the city of Unayza, situated in the province of al-Qasim, central Saudi Arabia. He was orphaned at a young age, his mother passing away when he was only 4, and his father when he was 7. His older brother Hamad was then entrusted with his care and upbringing. By the age of 12, Shaykh as-Sa'di had completed the memorization of the Qur'an, after which his pursuit of knowledge of the sacred law began in earnest. He studied the traditional disciplines at the hands of a number of senior scholars of the land. From them is Shaykh Ibrahim al-Jasir. Born 1241 Hijrah, he first studied locally, then went to Syria to further his studies. Shaykh Ibrahim was well known for his good manners, scrupulousness, and generosity. He was also blessed with a lengthy life, passing away at the age of 97. Under him, Shaykh as-Sa'di studied Tafsir, Fiqh, and Hadith. His second teacher was Shaykh Saleh ibn Uthman al-Qadi. Born in Unayza in 1282 Hijrah, he traveled to Egypt to study at the famous Al-Azhar University, where he was granted ijazah in a number of subjects. Under him, Shaykh as-Sa'di studied Tawheed, Tafsir, Fiqh, Usul al-Fiqh, and grammar. His third teacher, Shaykh Ali ibn Nasser Abu Wadi. He first studied in Unayza and Riyadh and then traveled to India to study under the Hadith scholars, obtaining numerous authorizations in this field. Under him, Shaykh as-Sa'di learned Hadith and Tafsir. His fourth teacher was Shaykh Abdullah ibn Aid al-Harbi. He was born in 1249 Hijrah in the city of Unayza. He traveled to Hijaz and also to Egypt in his quest for knowledge. From him, Shaykh as-Sa'di learned fiqh, usul al-fiqh, and the disciplines connected with the Arabic language. Shaykh Sa'di, may Allah have mercy on him, was known for his worship, character, and abstinence from worldliness. Shaykh Saleh ibn Abdulaziz al-Uthaymin remarked, "The deceased, may Allah have mercy on him, was exceptional with regards to his excellent conduct and his humility to both young and old. He was a person of worship, abstinence, and scrupulousness, as well as a faqih, muhaddith, wa'iz, khatib, linguist, and author. He combined within him knowledge of a variety of disciplines." Shaykh Abdulaziz ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with him, said, "He, may Allah have mercy on him, had a great concern for fiqh and its issues involving differences of opinion, paid attention to knowing the stronger opinion along with its proof. He hardly spoke unless there was a benefit. I sat with him on more than one occasion in Mecca and Riyadh, and he only spoke sparingly, except in issues of knowledge. He was humble and had an excellent character. Whoever reads his books will realize his virtue, knowledge, and concern for the textual proofs. May Allah bestow mercy upon him." From the age of 23 up until his death, Shaykh Sa'di devoted his life to teaching, instructing, and cultivating the people. During this time, he authored over 30 books and treatises. Shaykh Ar-Rahman As-Sa'di, after suddenly falling ill, passed away just before dawn on Thursday the 23rd of Jumada al-Akhir, 1376 Hijrah. May Allah shower mercy upon him, be pleased with him, and raise him to the ranks of the truthful ones. The theme. The book consists of a short didactic poem, which its author entitled The Journey to Allah and the Home of the Hereafter, as well as a brief explanation to the poem, which he called The Exquisite Pearl. The nature and brevity of the book is such that it may be regarded as an introduction or a primer to the science of suluk. The book elucidates the main stations, maqamat or manazil, that the heart is required to embrace as part of its journeying to Allah. What is meant by station is a praiseworthy quality, such as sincerity, love, fear, hope, patience, satisfaction, or renunciation, which the heart succeeds in acquiring and firmly rooting in itself. When this occurs, the heart is said to have arrived at that particular station. If, however, the praiseworthy quality wavers and has not settled in it, then the heart is said to be in a state, not a station. Ibn al-Qayyim, may Allah have mercy upon him, explained the distinction between states and stations in the following manner. What is correct here is that these occurrences and stations are named so by taking into consideration the particular state for it. So they are glimmerings, flashes, and external appearances at the onset of their occurrence, in the same way that lightning glimmers and flashes from a distance. But when they dawn upon him and he encounters them, then they become states. If they become firmly established within him, without vanishing, then they are called stations. So initially they are glimmers and flashes, midway they are states, and finally they are stations. Therefore, the initial glimmer of light is the state, as well as the station. But these terms are only named so by taking into consideration how they connect with the heart, how manifest they are upon it, and how firmly rooted they are in it. The difference between the two may also be clarified by the following example. Renunciation, or zuhd, is one of the lofty stations of wayfaring, being proven so by the text of the book, the Sunnah, and the agreement of the Salaf as-Salih, the pious predecessors of this nation, or Ummah. So knowledge of the world's ephemerality, the censure of it and of those who chase after it, and the praise for those who turn away from it and instead aspire to the afterlife, is what initially causes the heart to incline towards renunciation. Then, if success is granted, there appears from the limbs certain acts that indicate the presence of this state in the heart, such as shunning worldliness and materialism, and engaging in righteous actions and spiritual works. This state then encounters opposing influences, such as the ego's insinuations, satanic whisperings, and the soul's capriciousness, which urge and lure him towards worldliness. In the wake of this onslaught, this state may waver or fluctuate. It may even vanish completely. But if these influences are combated, and the effects become firmly ingrained and deeply rooted in the heart, then it is called a station. One of the purposes of suluk is to aid the transition from experiencing states to arriving at stations, and from experiencing moments of reliance, patience, fear, hope, satisfaction in Allah, etc., to being permanently adorned with these essential and praiseworthy qualities. The actual vehicle for this transition is inner struggle, or mujahada, by which these qualities may be imposed and then imprinted upon the heart. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Indeed, knowledge is acquired by learning it, and forbearance is acquired by imposing it upon oneself." About the translation. The following points are related to the actual translation. 2 critical Arabic editions of the book have been used for this translation. The first is the edition of Shaykh Ali Hassan al-Halabi. The second is the one prepared by Ashraf ibn Abdul Maqsood, one of the 15 or so As-Sa'adi titles that he has edited. May Allah reward them both with goodness for their services and efforts. Footnotes have been added from the words of Ibn al-Qayyim, a saintly scholar and a master of both the inward and outward sciences of Islam. May Allah illuminate his grave and sanctify his soul. Most of these words are from his magnum opus on Islamic spirituality entitled Madarij As-Salikeen, or Stations of the Wayfarers, in which he extensively quotes the pietists and masters of suluk from the early Muslims. I would like to express my thanks to Safiya Debar, Asif Sharif, and Arsalan Ubaidullah, who proofread the translation and made valuable suggestions for its improvement. I'm also grateful to Abu Rumaysa, who not only checked the translation but also contributed immensely in the translation of the actual poetry itself. May Allah grant each of them felicity and well-being in both worlds. Headings have been included at the beginning of each chapter. In addition, a bibliography of the sources used for this introduction has been given at the end of this book, along with a general index of names and terms that occur in the book. Finally, the believer in his quest for spiritual growth and in his desire to draw closer to Allah knows that his is not a one-sided affair. Rather, he is reassured and comforted by the promise of divine reciprocity, about which the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah, mighty and majestic is He, said, I am as my servant thinks I am, and I am with him when he remembers me. If he remembers me to himself, I remember him to myself. If he remembers me in the assembly, I remember him in an assembly better than it. If he draws closer to me by a handspan, I draw closer to him by an arm's length. And if he draws closer to me by an arm's length, I draw closer to him by a fathom. And if he comes walking to me, I come hastening to him. All praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. May Allah's blessings and peace be upon our Master, Muhammad, and his family, his companions, and all of those who follow them. Abu Aaliyah Surkheel ibn Anwar Sharif, 8th of Rabi al-Thani, 1422 Hijrah, corresponding to the 31st of August, 2001 CE, London, England. Translation of the poem. Fortunate are those who avoid the destructive paths, intending the stations of Allah's good pleasure, those who journey with the utmost sincerity, following the legislation by which faith is measured, those who build the stations of their journey, submitting between being fearful and being hopeful, those whose hearts the Divine has filled with devotion to Him and love for the Most Merciful, those who remember Him and do so abundantly, in private, public, at all times in continuance, seeking nearness to the Sovereign Master by obeying Him and forsaking disobedience, doing what is obligatory and optional is their way, inspecting their own faults and their deficiencies, their souls patiently enduring all that is disdainful, desirous of what it entails of benevolence. They arrive at the station of contentment, ultimately reaching the garden in safety. For His bounties to His creation they are grateful, with their heart, tongues, and the limbs of their body. Reliance is their companion in all affairs, while striving in the pleasure of the All-Merciful, worshipping the Divine, believing in His presence, thus taking their place at the station of excellence, advising others to that which pleases their Lord, with knowledge, guidance, and compassion, accompanying the people in bodily form, while their spirit dwells at a sublimer station. They alert creation to their complete need for Allah, continuously fearing a decrease in their faith, their hearts turning away from all distractions, completely emptied of other than the Most Merciful. Their movements, concerns, and their resolves are all for Allah, not creation, nor the devil. The best of friends is the seeker of these paths, which leads to acquiring goodness and ihsan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Introduction. All praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. May Allah extol and send blessings and peace upon Muhammad and upon his family, companions, and followers. These are some brief but beneficial comments to my poem regarding the journey to Allah and the home of the afterlife, explaining its meanings and clarifying its premises. The poem encapsulates the main stations, or manazil, for the wayfarers to Allah, which should lead them to the gardens of delight and to the closeness of the Beneficent Lord. It should also safeguard them from the torment of the hellfire and from the anguish of being veiled from Allah. I beseech Allah by His benevolence and bounty that He cause this work to be purely for His face and for drawing closer to Him. The Awakening. Realize that what is intended by ibadah or worship is to serve Allah. Have gnosis or ma'arifah of Him. Love Him, continually turn to Him in repentance, and to traverse the paths that lead to the abode of eternal peace. Dar as-Salam. Most people are overwhelmed by their sensual pleasures and are subjected by their carnal desires and habits. They give no importance to this matter at all, nor attempt to make it their basis. On the contrary, they turn away from worship and instead preoccupy themselves with their carnal desires. They abandon it and instead dedicate themselves to their worldly pursuits. They do not prevent themselves in order to make up for the time they have squandered. So in their ignorance and oppression they are confused. With their soul's desires they are diverted from being devoted to Allah. Concerning their Lord's remembrance they are heedless. In their religious practice they are remiss. And in the drunken love of their habits they blindly wander. Those who forgot Allah, so He caused them to forget their own selves. Such are the corrupt ones. Surah Al-Hashr, Ayah 19. None take heed of this dire neglect and this enormous calamity except for the few who possess intelligence and nobility. They realize that the greatest loss lies in being preoccupied with that which produces nothing for its doer except perdition and misery. Therefore, they prefer the perfect to the imperfect. They trade the ephemeral for the eternal, and they bear the burden of legal responsibility and worship until it becomes a source of delight for them and a part of their very nature, by which they become leaders. So listen attentively to their description, and seek the help of Allah in adorning yourselves with their traits. 1. The aspiration. Fortunate are those who avoid the destructive paths, intending the stations of Allah's good pleasure. This is the foundation of their path and the principal course of their party, in that they avoid the paths of loss and anguish and intend the paths of Allah's good pleasure. They avoid the paths of shaitan and intend to be worshippers of the Most Merciful. They avoid the paths of blazing fire and intend the paths of eternal bliss. They abandon evil and do good. They keep their hearts, tongues, and limbs away from prohibited and repugnant actions, and instead busy themselves with obligatory and praiseworthy actions. They adorn themselves with beautiful character and purge themselves of all reprehensible traits. 2. The station of sincerity. Those who journey with the utmost sincerity, following the legislation by which faith is measured. These two principles, ikhlas, sincerity, and conformity, are a prerequisite for every act of worship, inward or outward, to be valid. Every act that is not done intending the face of Allah is futile, and every act that does not conform to the sunnah of Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam is rejected. It is only when an action combines sincerity for the one being worshipped, which means intending to seek the face of Allah when performing the action, and conformity with the Messenger, by doing those actions that have been prescribed and legislated, that an action becomes acceptable. 3. The station of fear and hope. Those who build the stations of their journey, being between fear and hope, meaning that in their journey they attach themselves to reverential fear and hope in all their affairs, clinging to them. They do this by inspecting their own faults regarding the fulfillment of Allah's rights, which induces fear in them, and by reflecting upon Allah's bounties and kindness upon them, which instills hope in them. They reflect over Allah's attributes of greatness, magnificence, wisdom, and justice, which induces fear in them, and they reflect upon the divine attributes of mercy, beneficence, generosity, and kindness, having hope in what they necessitate. So when they do an act of goodness, they combine being between fear and hope, hoping for its acceptance, but fearing that it will be rejected. If they do an act of evil, they fear being punished, but hope for being forgiven by the grace of Allah. Between fear and hope they fluctuate. To them they constantly turn to seek shelter, and from them the affairs of their journey alternate. Indeed, they are the ones who succeed by flying colors. They are the ones who are victorious. 4. The Station of Love. Those whose hearts the Divine has filled with devotion to Him and love for the Most Merciful. This station, which is the station of love, is the bedrock of all stations. From its spring, every righteous action, all beneficial deeds, and all the lofty stations. Love refers to the heart being attached to the beloved such that it needs this love and cannot do without it. This requires that the lover withhold from all that the beloved detests and hasten towards all that the beloved is pleased with, doing so readily, willingly, and eagerly. If he speaks for Allah. If he remains silent, he does so for Allah. If he moves, it is for Allah. If he remains still, it is for Him. This love then gives rise to a yearning and a restlessness for Allah, such that the lover never feels settled unless in his devotion. If it is said, does love, which is the highest station, have any causes or means leading to it? It is said in reply, Allah has not made anything that is sought after, except that He also made causes and means by which it can be acquired. From the greatest of these causes and means are withholding from any statement, action, or thought that will sever you from it, increasing in the remembrance of Allah with presence of heart, reflecting upon His noble word, acknowledging the tremendous bounties that Allah has bestowed upon the servant, standing before Him with presence of heart and due etiquette, attending the gatherings of the lovers of Allah, and turning away from whatever will cut you off from any of this. Whoever does this will attain the love of Allah, if Allah wills, and it is His aid that is sought. This is why I said, 5. The Station of Remembrance. Those who remember Him, and do so abundantly, in private, public, and at all times in continuance. This is a noble station which each person is in need of. Indeed, it is a need which ranks above all other needs. The remembrance, dhikr of Allah, is the edifice of one's time. By it, grief, anxiety, and distress can be dispelled. With it, joy and happiness can be attained. It cultivates barren hearts, makes healthy hearts resplendent, and it leads to the loftiest of stations. In it are benefits and virtues that cannot be enumerated. Allah, exalted as He, said, O you who believe, remember Allah abundantly, and glorify Him morning and evening. Surah Al-Ahzab, ayahs 41 and 42. The Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, advised a man who asked, The duties of Islam are many for me, so instruct me. He replied, Never let your tongue cease to be moist with the remembrance of Allah. He, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, The loners lead the way. We asked, Who are the loners? He replied, Those men and women who remember Allah abundantly. I composed the following lines of poetry. Be one who remembers Allah under all conditions, for the remembrance of Allah has no time restrictions. The remembrance of the Deity, in private and public, remove your anxiety and grief and expel it, procuring both religious and worldly excellence, driving away whisperings at their occurrence. The Chosen One informed his companions one day, Abundant remembrance is why the loners lead the way. To seek Allah's aid was Mu'ad's given legacy, so as to remember, thank, and worship Him beautifully. He advised a person who sought sincere counsel, who was striving hard to carry out laws legal, that let your tongue remain most with it. This will aid every matter and facilitate it. He informed that dhikr is a plant for its people, cultivating gardens eternal and abodes perpetual. He informed that Allah mentions His servant and is with him in all matters, facilitating it. If dhikr had no virtue, fine, except being a path to loving the divine, stopping the youth from backbiting and tail-carrying, and from uttering that which corrupts their well-being. A great acquisition and incentive it would be to engage in Allah's dhikr abundantly. But due to our ignorance, our dhikr is rare, just as our worship of the deity is rare. The dhikr of Allah is light for the one remembering Allah in his heart, speech, grave, and on the day of resurrection, and Allah's aid is sought. 6. Seeking nearness to Allah. Seeking nearness to the Sovereign Master by obeying Him and by forsaking disobedience. Performing these acts of obedience, especially the obligatory ones, and leaving the sinful ones, draws one closer to Allah and leads to Him. In a sacred tradition, a hadith Qudsi, it states, "My servant does not draw closer to me with anything more beloved to me than the obligatory duties that I have enjoined upon him. My servant continues to draw closer to me by performing optional deeds until I love him." Due to this, I said, 7. Self-inspection. Doing what is obligatory and optional is their way, inspecting their own faults and their deficiencies. Fulfilling the obligatory duties and increasing in performing optional deeds, along with seeing oneself as being deficient or excessive, is from perfection. So striving to do actions eliminates indolence and laziness from oneself, whereas inspecting one's deficiencies dispels the ego's self-conceit, which corrupts actions and renders them futile. 8. The station of patience. Their souls patiently enduring all that is disdainful, desirous of what it entails of divine benevolence. Patient perseverance, sabr, is restraining the soul from what it finds disdainful, when doing so entails the pleasure of the most merciful. Patient perseverance is of 3 types. Patiently persevering in the obedience of Allah, so that it may be fulfilled. Patiently persevering against disobedience, so that it may be abandoned. And patiently persevering with regards to the hardships that Allah decrees, not showing any impertinence towards it. When the soul feels lazy about obeying Allah, one exhorts and enjoins it to do so, as well as encouraging it by reminders of the rewards entailed. When the soul is strong in inviting towards disobedience to Allah, one restrains and warns it from doing so, and reminds it about the punishment for disobedience. Patient perseverance is needed in all these affairs. 9. The station of contentment. They arrive at the station of contentment, ultimately reaching the garden in safety. The station of contentment is loftier than that of patience, for patience is restraining the soul against what it finds disdainful, although an opposing desire still remains within it. Contentment, on the other hand, melts away this opposing desire, causes satisfaction with Allah, and brings about tranquility and expanse of the breast. It may even cause delight to be experienced in times of hardships, just as others experience delight in times of ease. When the worshipper reaches this station, his life is remedied and his eye experiences coolness. This is why contentment is called a paradise of this world and a repose for the worshippers. Whoever is content with Allah, Allah is content with him. Whoever is content with simple provisions from Allah, Allah is content with simple actions from Him. The reality behind contentment is to receive Allah's religious ordinances and His all-embracing decree with an open heart and a cheerful soul, without resentment or indignation. 10. The station of gratitude. For His bounties to His creation they are grateful, with the heart, tongue, and the limbs of their body. Shukr, gratitude is expressed with the heart by acknowledging Allah's favors, attesting to them and not considering oneself deserving of them, but instead recognizing that they are purely from the Lord's bountiful grace. It is expressed with the tongue by praising Allah for His favors and proclaiming them. It is expressed with the limbs by not being disobedient to Allah, but rather by utilizing His favors to obey Him. If he is granted any worldly thing, he thanks Allah for it. If something of this world is removed from him, he still thanks Allah, for sometimes the withdrawal of a favor removes the person from a greater evil. If he is granted the ability to do an act of obedience, he sees this as a grace, tawfiq from Allah, for which he thanks Him, and Allah's aid is sought. 11. The station of reliance. Reliance is their companion in all affairs, while striving in the pleasure of the All-Merciful. The servant's perfection lies in these two matters, which are reliance, tawakkul upon Allah, and striving diligently to obey Allah. The servant's perfection is hindered by the loss of any one of them. The reality of reliance entails two matters, dependence upon Allah and trust in Allah. So he depends upon his Lord with his heart for procuring what will benefit him in both his religious and worldly affairs. He acknowledges his lack of power and inability and instead places his trust in Allah in order to acquire what will benefit him or to repel what will harm him. Furthermore, he strives to utilize those causes that will lead him to what is sought after. The details of this is that when he firmly resolves to perform an act of worship, he strives to complete it and beautify it, sparing no effort to do so. He frees himself from depending upon his own self and strength, but instead resorts to and depends upon his Lord in order to allow him to complete and perfect that act. Having a good expectation of Allah in this and putting his trust in attaining that which he placed his reliance upon Allah for. When he firmly resolves to leave an act of disobedience that his soul incites him to, he fulfills those causes that will lead him to leaving that sin, such as considering it and turning his limbs from it. Then, after this, he places his trust in Allah, resorts to Him in order that He may protect him from it, and has good expectations of Allah with regards to Allah protecting him. If he does this in everything that he does and leaves, then success is to be hoped for him, if Allah the Exalted wills. But as for the person who seeks Allah's aid and relies upon Him, but leaves the striving that is a prerequisite for it, then this is not reliance. Rather, it is a mockery. Such is the case of one who does strive, but depends upon his own self, and does not rely upon his Lord. He is only deluding himself. 12. The station of excellence. Worshipping the Divine, believing in His presence, thus taking their place at the station of excellence. This is the station known as the station of excellence, ihsan, which the Prophet ﷺ explained as being that you worship Allah as if you see Him, for if you do not see Him, He sees you. When a person envisages this station in all his states, in particular the state of worship, his heart is prevented from turning to other than his Lord. Instead, he is fully content with Allah, focuses his heart upon Him, and has decorum while worshiping Him, doing whatever perfects it and refraining from whatever mars it. This station is one of the greatest and sublimest of all spiritual stations. However, it requires gradually training the souls, step by step. The servant will not cease habituating his soul to it until he is drawn to it and accustoms himself with it. Then the servant will live in delight of his Lord, experiencing joy and bliss in His closeness. 13. The station of good character. Advising others to that which pleases their Lord, with knowledge, guidance, and compassion. Accompanying the people in bodily form, while their spirits dwell at a sublimer station. This is their state with the people, which is the most perfect of states and the most sublime. They begin by sincerely advising people to their utmost, loving for them the good they love for themselves, deploring for them the evil they deplore for themselves, striving to remove every evil from them and with all that is possible, and exerting themselves in order to bring about benefit to them with every means at their disposal. This they do by enjoining goodness, forbidding evil, feeding those that suffer from hunger, clothing those that are destitute, alleviating those that are distressed, teaching those that are ignorant, restraining those that are oppressors, helping those that are oppressed, warding off potential harm from people, and keeping the harms of their own selves away from others. Furthermore, their association with people is external and bodily. As for their hearts and spirits, they hover around the Beloved and seek to be as close to Him as possible. Sometimes the person humbly abases himself before Him with fear and humility. Furthermore, he expresses gratitude to Him with love of Him, being led to this by witnessing His kindness and closeness. He then inclines towards all that is pleasing to Allah, strives in the worship of Him, and shows benevolence to His creation. Indeed, these are the true people. These are the intelligent and perspicacious ones, and there is no might, no power, except with Allah. 15. The station of attentive care. They alert creation to their complete need for Allah, continuously fearing a decrease in their faith. This is the station of attentive care, of the realities of faith and the milestones of Ihsan. For it is not befitting for the worshipper to ever turn away from contemplating his own condition and reflecting upon the deficiencies in his own actions. Instead, he should expend all his efforts, before as well as during, performing an action, in making sure that it is performed correctly and excellently. He should also safeguard it from anything that may render it void, and remove it from anything that may corrupt it. For indeed, preserving the action is actually greater than the action itself. Thus, whenever a person increases in his attentive care and increases in his striving in the action, his faith increases. If, however, his attentive care decreases, his faith diminishes in proportion. From the greatest of matters wherein attentive care should be exercised is in the performance of actions and in the milestones of Ihsan, which refers to the fervent desire to perform acts of worship with presence of heart and total devotion to Allah. Likewise, from the most important matters that deserve attentive care are the favors of Allah that He bestows upon a person. It is desired for a person to greatly thank Allah for granting him the grace to perform that action. Likewise, attentive care is fear and hope, fearing that the act may be rejected due to self-conceit, ostentation, arrogance, or by not fulfilling it in the way that it deserves to be fulfilled, yet hoping in its acceptance by Allah's mercy, benevolence, and grace, which includes being granted the grace to perform that action in the first place. 16 and 17. The station of renunciation. Their hearts turning away from all distractions, completely emptied of other than the most merciful. Their movements, concerns, and their resolves are all for Allah, not creation, nor the devil. Meaning that they empty their hearts of all that distracts them from Allah and distances them from His good pleasure, this being the reality of worldly renunciation, or zuhud. This emptying will not be sufficient until and unless the heart is filled with beneficial thoughts and truthful resolves. So the servant's ideas and thoughts should be concerned with all that will draw him closer to Allah, such as acquiring knowledge, contemplating over the Qur'an, remembering Allah with presence of heart, reflecting over Allah's kindness, the fear of slipping and committing disobedience, reflecting over the attributes of the All-Merciful, and the fact that they are free from every blemish and defect, and reflecting upon the grave and its states, the day of resurrection and its events, paradise and its delights, and hell and its blazing fire. Their thoughts revolve around these matters, away from those negative thoughts that engender nothing but grief, harm, wasting of time, and psychological instability, all of which are unhealthy for a person, both in this life and the afterlife. 18. The fellowship. The best of friends is the seeker of these paths, which leads to acquiring goodness and ihsan. These are the ones who will cause their friends to be happy, providing they follow their path. Theirs is the path that Allah has ordered. We ask Him to guide us to, because of Him favoring them with true faith and with actualizing it. We ask Allah that He guides us to the straight path, the path of those whom He has bestowed His grace. Of the prophets, the truthful ones, the martyrs, and the pious, they are the best company. Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 69. We ask that He save us from the paths of His anger and misguidance, which lead to disgrace and destruction, for He is the most generous of those who show generosity, and the most merciful of those who show mercy. I ask Allah, seeking the means of nearness to Him by His most beautiful names, attributes, and favors, that He not prevent us from the good that is with Him of divine benevolence and forgiveness, because of our evils, our deficiencies in fulfilling His rights, and our transgressions, and that He makes this sincerely for seeking His face, and a cause for attaining bliss in the gardens of paradise. May Allah shower abundant blessings and peace upon Muhammad, the unlettered prophet, who was sent as a mercy to the worlds, and upon his family, companions, and followers. The End. The Exquisite Pearl by Shaykh Ar-Rahman As-Saadi, translated by Abu Aaliyah, Surkheel, Sharif. Read by Luqman Abu Yusuf. Wednesday, September 11th, 2024.